Hello, I'm Apurva Kaluru from the Australian Institute of International Affairs, and today I'm joined by Carl Ongara. How are you today, Carl?
Very well, thank you.
Very good. Carl is a former Vice President of the AIIA Queensland office, and he's still a member of the AIIA and has been for 25 years. Carl's just come back from Geneva, actually, after spending 3.5 years there. So today, Carl is actually going to be doing a talk at AIIA ACT. We're going to have a few preliminary questions before that. So Carl, do you think that the US and China are destined for war?
Well, this is an interesting question. It's the subject of a new book that's been put out by Graham Allison, who is a professor of international relations at Harvard University, a very authoritative voice in the foreign policy community in the United States. And indeed, this is something of a story that the Americans are beginning to tell themselves, that there is a sort of a pathway that they are going to be not only in competition with China for predominance in the international order, but in fact are going to have to fight a war with them. It's what Allison calls the Thucydides trap, the trap that a rising power will always challenge a dominant power for control of the international order. And so this idea that there's a destiny towards war has captured the imagination, the public and the foreign policy establishment, the ideas that sit around foreign policy. I don't think it's right. I don't think we are destined for war between China and the United States. I think there is plenty of room for manoeuvre before something as catastrophic as war would occur, and I think we have to be very much mindful of how diplomacy, how working through that particular and very important bilateral relationship is in fact going to be the challenge of the future.
Right, and with China as such a predominant actor in our region, what implications might China's rise have for Australia and Australians?
Well, China's rise, or as the Chinese call it, their return to their rightful position in the international order. Remember, only a couple of hundred years ago they were the largest economy in the world, and they are clearly, since 1979 and the open door policy, have been growing their economy quite spectacularly, and you can look at the development that has occurred there. And that's important for all countries of the Asia-Pacific region. For Australia, China is our number one trading partner. It's America's number one trading partner. In fact, most countries in the region, it's our number one trading partner. And so China does have an influence in shaping the economic order of the region. It also has, as a result of its economic growth, has an important and growing military presence in the Asia-Pacific region, and that is also a factor that Australia and other countries have to take into consideration when we think about our forward foreign and defence policies. So it is that China's rise is having an influence on the shape of the regional order. There's no doubt about that. But I don't think that it's the kind of inexorable march towards war with China, which has captured the public attention a little bit in recent times, that I think we should be worried about. Nor do I think Hugh White is right in his latest quarterly essay when he says that this is now going to be a region in which America loses and China wins. I don't think it's as simple or as black and white as that. I think there is plenty of scope for both China and the United States and Australia and its other allies and friends to win in terms of economic growth, development and prosperity.
So we haven't seen China as a major power for the last couple hundred years, like you said. So how do you think that we should remain optimistic in the eventual rise of China and the potential for it to rise?
China's a big and important player in our region, but it's only one of a number of big and important players in our region. The Japanese is the third largest economy in the world. The two Koreas, South Korea is a very large and important economy, and then you've got all the middle powers like Australia and Indonesia, Vietnam, the Philippines, Malaysia. There's a whole lot of important rising powers in our part of the world, most of whom are in fact either our formal alliance partners or have an alliance relationship with the United States. And that's important because in China's rise, we have to remember that it's not just the US-China relationship that's at stake here. It's a whole web of interconnected relationships around the region that is going to be affected. I think, when you think of China's rise, I think it's important to put it into a bit of context as well. China has, as I said, since 1979 grown its economy. It only went through the Revolutionary War in the 1940s and early 1950s. So it's really newly re-establishing itself on the international stage. It's doing so in ways that are really concerning some of the regional states. We can think of the rocks and shoals of the South China Sea and the militarization of the South China Sea. We think of the interference that China has had in countries like Australia in recent times. There's been a lot of that in the media. So we've got to be able to basically shape the way that Beijing uses its power in the future for good, not bad. It's done some of those things well. It's a good investor in renewable energy technology, for example, but it's also a terrible coal polluter, and they're going to build another 22 coal-fired power stations indeed over the next couple of years. So it can play an important role, but it needs to be, we need to work with China, not as sort of this combative sense that we're in a war with them in order for that to happen.
Sure. So with the current media outrage and countries' preoccupation with the actions of China in places like the South China Sea, how important do you think is the liberal rules-based order in our context currently?
Well, it's incredibly important for a country like Australia that the world operates according to a set of rules that everyone abides by, because as a middle power, we can't dictate the way that other countries will behave. We have to try and reinforce the rules and the laws by which every country can play together nicely. And as long as those rules are upheld, then that's good for Australia. So, for example, when China is taken to the International Court of Arbitration in The Hague over its land reclamation activities in the South China Sea and loses, we have to be prepared to say, no, we think that the rules are important on things like UNCLOS, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea. So defending and promoting those rules are really important. China, I say in the speech tonight, even though it doesn't always follow the rules, it has been getting better at following the rules of the international order. It has signed up to more of the international treaties. It's behaving, at least in the trade sphere, a bit more like the responsible stakeholder that Robert Zoellick, the State Department official, had wanted it to be some 20 years ago.
Fantastic. And thank you so much for joining us today, Carl. We really appreciate you taking the time for us, and we look forward to hearing you speak soon.
You're welcome. Thank you.